think. So.
Okay. Okay.
Is there a hard, fast cutoff? Okay, we can just keep going with questions.
Yes, honestly, with and are you logging into the meeting? Do you have the link, or do you want me to send you the link?
Well, I have what you sent, and mine says, "Please wait for host to start this meeting."
Oh, okay. So you must. I just.
Oh, now it's connected.
Okay,
So I think we're okay.
Here, let me get you plugged in. Here, one sec.
It looks like it's going to work.
Yeah, so there's a few more people in the waiting room too, and let me rename myself.
There we go.
Okay,
you can see your smiling face.
And so I'm gonna turn off the phone. Yep.
Okay.
Do you want to test your presentation? I know we've done this a couple of times, but. Hello, everyone. This is Olga Redding with Iowa Organic Association. I'm just allowing everyone into the room at the moment, so you are all probably connecting. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you could, please mute your microphones while the presentation is happening. That will be greatly appreciated. And then while the presentation is happening too, feel free to type in your questions in the chat box. We will go ahead and allow Paul to go through his presentation, and then we'll answer questions at the end of the meeting. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Olga Redding, and I am the Iowa Organic Association Education and Outreach Coordinator. Welcome to our Spotlight on Organics webinar with Paul Mugge. As you guys know, Paul is on our board of directors, and he is a, some would say, renowned organic farmer in the state of Iowa. And we love Paul and all he does, so we are very excited to have him share with you his experiences farming organically, but also some of the research that he has come across over the years, and that are very enlightening as far as the climate changes are concerned. So it's very exciting to have you all here today. Thank you for coming. And what I'll do is I will actually start the meeting, since we have so many folks that are kind of new names. I will actually have a short presentation, just 5 slides, that will talk about Iowa Organic Association. So we'll go ahead and get started with that, and then Paul will follow right after me. All righty. So we'll go ahead and start with my little presentation. And I am not sure why I'm getting subtitles. Let's see here. Okay, so stop subtitles. Okay, we don't need subtitles. Okay, so I'm going to share the presentation now. Sorry about that, guys. All right. So Iowa Organic Association, we are a statewide nonprofit organization. We were founded in 2006, and we are committed to education, advocacy, and community cooperation. Our mission is to advance organic agriculture and food systems in Iowa, and our members are a diverse group of farmers, gardeners, food and farm businesses, advocates, and consumers who are champions for the organic movement. Our priorities are education, outreach, advocacy, and community. As far as education is concerned, we've done quite a few different programs. We just completed the Growing Organic Expertise in Iowa, which is a technical training geared towards NRCS, FSA, anyone and everyone that may get in touch with a farmer that would be interested to become organic. We also were part of the Growing Stronger conference with the Midwest Organic Pork Conference, which is a conference that we created in 2019. And in addition, we've conducted quite a few on-farm field days back in pre-COVID era, and now we've moved into more of a webinar format with online resources. As far as outreach is concerned, we connect with the target audiences and the public to promote research, events, and resources that are beneficial to the organic community. We always are part of various conferences, trade shows, and events. And as far as what we are up to is always available on our website, also via our e-news, our calendar, social media, and our listserv. So if you haven't connected with us through any of these avenues, we definitely welcome you to do so. Advocacy is a huge part of our priorities as well. Whenever we can, we advance state level leadership policies dedicated to supporting the Iowa's growing organic community. And then as far as community, we encourage a culture of collaboration by connecting organic experts, stakeholders, and resources to strengthen Iowa's organic community. As far as our organic resource directory, we have developed this particular document. It's actually available on our website under the resources tab. You can download a PDF version of this document. It lists over 900 businesses, nonprofits, educators, and other service providers that are in this organic agriculture world. It serves as a valuable tool for anyone in Iowa's organic community to achieve growth and continued success within the organic industry. We are actually in the process of creating a new organic resources directory, an updated version. So if you are a business and looking forward to be in it, definitely connect with me. I'd be more than happy to let you know how you can be part of it. And then as far as membership, we are a nonprofit organization, so we rely heavily on your membership. Joining and supporting is as easy as going on our website under our membership tab, or reaching out to either myself or Roz at either one of our emails and the phone number below. And thank you again for your support, and we appreciate you being here today. This is all I have. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing the screen, and I'll allow Paul to present his presentation.
Okay, thanks, Olga. I'll try and share my screen. Slideshow. Okay, are we all right? Okay. I want to welcome everyone to this webinar. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to the Iowa Organic Association for producing this. I hope it's informative and worthwhile for each of you. As Olga said, I'm Paul Mugge. I farm in O'Brien County in far northwest Iowa. I took over the family farm from my dad in 1976, farmed conventionally for several years, and became completely organic in 2001. I have just a really small farm of about 300 acres. And this presentation may be a little different than what you were expecting. For some of the important issues of the day, I hope to present some of the relevant literature and then how I try to address that issue on my farm. And it's as much about why I farm as I do as it is the how, and the why is about much more than economics. I really hope you will ask lots and lots of questions in the Q&A period at the end. And if not today, you can contact me at any time by any of the ways listed on the screen, or you can visit my farm anytime you like, and I will stay on this call as long as anyone wants to talk. I have a wife, Karen, and 3 children and 7 adorable grandchildren, and you can ask me about them if you'd like to. I do want to emphasize up front that I don't have all the answers, and neither does the organic community in general. I hope to make the point, both from my experience and from the literature, that organic has a role to play in addressing some of the pressing environmental issues of our day. I also want to emphasize that the science isn't completely settled here. Not everyone agrees about the benefits of organic agriculture. There is some controversy, especially with regard to soil carbon sequestration, which has generated a lot of interest recently. I am certainly no scientist, and there are many variables here, such as geography, climate, soil management, etc. The carbon and nitrogen cycles are complex and not completely understood. And I think it's too early to make definitive statements about this. The models are just not that good yet, but they're getting better. So I don't want to overpromise, and frankly, a lot of organic is not all that helpful, but I think there is a large potential to make a difference. So here we go. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN recently said that we have about 60 years of harvest left. Hopefully that's pessimistic, but we're running out of time. Some of you may remember this lady. Rachel Carson was a scientist 70 years ago or so. She was studying why populations of bald eagles and other raptors were declining precipitously. And she discovered that the insecticide DDT was responsible, and she was viciously attacked by the chemical industry for her discovery. But she was right. And she described what she had discovered in a landmark book called Silent Spring in 1962. In that book, she said this: "We stand now where 2 roads diverge, but unlike the roads in Robert Frost's familiar poem, they are not equally fair. The road we have long been traveling is deceptively easy, a smooth superhighway on which we progress with great speed, but at its end lies disaster. The other fork of the road, the one less traveled by, offers our only chance to reach a destination that ensures the preservation of the earth," unquote. That was 60 years ago, and now we have 60 years left, and we're still at that fork on the road. But the easy road of the superhighway has gotten shorter, and our speed along it is faster. I and a lot of other farmers are trying instead to find our way along the road less traveled by. And there are an increasing number of scientists and organizations and consumers supporting that effort, and have come to realize the remarkable potential of organic agriculture, the road less traveled, to help alleviate and mitigate some of the many critical issues that we face. But projected changes, according to the 4th National Climate Assessment, before mid-century will reduce Midwest agriculture production to levels of the 1980s without major technical advances. And those advances will probably get harder to come by. The low-hanging fruit has already been picked, and our food system is broken. We have food allergies, and chronic health issues are epidemic. We have a serious loss of pollinators. We have GMOs and pesticide residues in our food. We burn way too much fossil fuel energy. Nutrient density is declining in our food, and many other things. But it's not all gloom and doom. The Organic Trade Association recently said organic agriculture presents a growing opportunity to mitigate climate change while creating economic, environmental, and health benefits for all food system participants. And the emphasis there, the all is mine. We're not talking about just benefiting farmers. We're talking about benefiting all consumers and the environment as a whole. And I've included the references, the little numbers at the bottom represent the citations that I have used in researching this, and all of those complete citations are at the end of the presentation. This is it's called Planetary Boundaries. It's an interesting way of looking at this, and the different sectors of this circle represent the different forcings for climate change, such as phosphorus and nitrogen, ocean acidification, biosphere integrity. And as you go out from the center, the green is that boundary is safe, and the heavy lines represent a boundary. And the yellow area in the middle, that's a zone of uncertainty where there's increasing risk. And then the red is where we've passed a boundary that we didn't want to pass. And in those areas in particular, agriculture is responsible for some of these forcings. So why do I farm organically? Mainly because industrial agriculture is unsustainable. And for a lot of reasons, all of them are important, and many others, at least initially for me, it was environmental and ecological. So I'm going to talk just briefly about my farm first, and then in more detail as we go on. My rotation is corn, soybeans, and small grain. And the small grain could be triticale, barley, oats, flax, canola, wheat, kind of whatever the market demands. And I always have red clover, usually cover crop of some kind in with the small grain. But the important thing, I think, is to rotate many things. I rotate crops, row crops and solid seeded crops, grasses, legumes, fall seeded, spring seeded. I rotate tillage systems, annual and perennial, but I think you need at least a 3-year rotation. I employ some cultural methods. Plant population, I plant a fairly high population, especially for soybeans. I plant later than my neighbors, especially for corn. Narrow rows is kind of a mixed bag. Cultivar selection is important. You need varieties that will germinate quickly and have strong emergence, will canopy early. And unfortunately, sometimes you need something that will yield in the presence of weeds. So for corn, that's the one place in my 3-year rotation that I really need to do full width tillage. And it's dist and field cultivated. I plant a normal population, but plant late. It's harrowed or rotary hoed 3 times, cultivated 3 times. But those are targets, and that depends on the weather, and doesn't, I guess, probably doesn't even usually work out that way. And it generally works. The secrets here: don't plant early. You must have a stand. Wherever there's a corn plant missing, there will be a weed to take its place. And don't hesitate to replant. And it hurts to tear it up and start over. But I think in the years when I've been faced with that decision, that the times when I decided to replant, I was glad that I did. And the times when I decided not to, I wished I had. Soybeans, they're ridge tilled in early May. Plant a pretty high population just because I know I'm going to kill some with the rotary hoe. Cultivated ideally 3 times, and we do walk the beans. If you're not familiar with ridge tillage, the 6 rows on the left in that picture have been planted, and the rest of the field has not yet been planted. So the first trip over the field is with a planter. So there's no pre-plant tillage. There's attachments on the planter that scrape the top 1 or 2 off of that ridge right where the old corn row is. and the soybeans are planted right in that corn row. It's a beautiful seed bed. It's great for organic soybeans, and it's great for resource conservation. After it's been planted, it looks like this. It looks fairly black, but all of that residue is still there, just slightly covered up. And that's what it looks like in July. And I should say that it doesn't always look like this. You know, I take the pictures where it looks good, and I have my disasters occasionally too. I like this picture. These beans have been cultivated once. They have not yet been walked, but all of that corn residue is still there, and it's protecting the soil and preventing erosion. And hopefully it works also. Winter Triticale is my first choice as far as a small grain because I have a good market for it, and it's really nice to have a fall seeded crop in the rotation. So it's no-till drilled early October, right behind the combine, harvested in July, and it works too. Some of the sources of information that I used for this, Rodale Institute recently last year published a white paper, as did the Organic Trade Association. I used the 4th National Climate Assessment, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, Organic Farming Research Foundation, also published some guides last year, and numerous journal articles, and all of those things are referenced at the end. So unfortunately, almost all of our environmental problems, with the possible exception of radioactive waste, have a source embedded in agriculture. And organic agriculture tries to address some of these challenges. And this is according to Clark et al. Last year. Food systems emissions could preclude achieving the 1.5 and 2 climate change targets. And it's impossible to meet the Paris Agreement's global warming goals without major reductions in emissions from food and agriculture. In other words, agriculture may not be able to solve all the problems, but it will not be possible to solve all the problems without agriculture doing its part. According to Rodale Institute, these are some of the ways that organic agriculture can help, and they have developed quite a list. This may be a little bit optimistic, but there's a big potential for organic to make a difference. First, I'll talk just a minute about water quality and soil quality. The late Dr. Cambridella at Iowa State and Kathleen Dellett have research plots in Iowa. They have established these rotations. There's 3 different rotations: an organic rotation, a conventional corn soybeans, and they also have a pasture rotation. There's 30 instrumented plots, and they have isolated each of these plots hydrologically. They have tile lines above and between the plots and then in the plots, so that they can collect all the water that leaves each plot, both above ground and below ground. And the 3 years that they recorded this, between 2012 and 2014, the conventional systems had a nitrate loading of 79.2 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare, and the organic systems was right at half of that. And nitrogen fertility management will not be successful. And the reason for that, the reason he said this, is because if you reduce nitrogen fertility enough to reduce your nitrate loading by as much as she found, your yields will be drastically reduced. But organic has a way to do this. In the Iowa nutrient reduction strategy, their goals are to reduce nitrate loading by 41%, phosphorus loading by 29%, and organic agriculture by itself could achieve those goals. Another local experiment, this is Natalie Hunt, University of Minnesota, and Matt Liebman here at Iowa have established a big trial, the Marsden Farm in Iowa. They have 3 different rotations. There's a 2-year, a 3-year, and a 4-year. And none of these are organic per se, but they've just extended the rotation, including small grains and alfalfa. And each one of these treatments is divided in 2 with a low herbicide and a high or conventional herbicide regime. And I highlighted that column with the soil sediment yields, and the herbicide treatments really didn't have much of an effect. But as you extend that rotation, the sediment yields are declined quite a bit. And the next 2 columns, the nitrogen runoff and the phosphorus runoff, the same thing. You've reduced those loads. As far as nitrate leaching, it didn't make that much difference. So what do I do in my system? I have prairie strips. These rows are on the contour, and they end at a grass headland on one end, a grass waterway on the other end. So any water that does run off will be directed into those grassy areas. And because of the ridge tillage, I have sort of a mini terrace every 30 inches. And these prairie strips are very good at stopping runoff. All right, pesticide residues. As far as reducing pesticide residues, both in food and in the environment, that's easy because I'm not allowed to use any of the normal pesticides. So I used several other techniques, mechanical and biological, to control pests. As far as weed management, I do quite a little mechanical cultivation, rotary hoeing, and row crop cultivator. I use cultivation mirrors so I can see how I'm doing. I do have automatic guidance, which helps quite a bit, especially with straight rows. As far as some biological methods, this is some work by Matt Liedman, again at Iowa State, where he was looking at seed predation. It turns out that if you leave those weed seeds on the surface of the soil for an extended period of time, something's going to eat them. It's like carabid beetles or field crickets or earthworms or field mice or probably birds. So the horizontal scale here is the months after seed dispersal, and the vertical scale is the percent of the weed seeds that are eaten. And in my case with ridge tillage, those seeds are on the soil surface for 6 to 7 months. So about 70% of those weed seeds are eaten over that period of time. And I need all the help I can get. Again, the narrow prairie strips help because the secrets here are that you can't do any fall tillage, which I don't, and you have to provide habitat for those little creatures. And I have a beetle bank alongside each one of my strips that provides habitat for things like carabid beetles and field crickets. So they have a place where they're protected and they're there when I need them. I do have a flame cultivator. I've only had it for a year. I'm still learning how to use it. It's cheap to operate and can be very effective. I think it has a place. Allelopathy is another thing that I take advantage of. In this picture, there's fall triticale on the right, flax on the left. The rows are north and south, so I don't think it's a light effect. And there's actually another row of flax next to the triticale. Allelopathy, if you're not familiar, is the ability of some plants to exude chemicals from their roots that inhibit the germination and early growth of other plants. In this case, the triticale has inhibited the growth of that flax. And I try and use that to my advantage to control weed seeds. All right. Monoculture basically yields pests. And if you have a corn soybean rotation, that's pretty close to a monoculture. It's 2 summer annual row crops. In 1945, 7% of the world's crops were lost to insects. And 50 years later, after millions and millions of pounds of pesticides, 14% of the crops are lost to insects. So we're winning a battle now and again, but we're losing the war. And it's It's because of insect resistance to pesticides. It's because we're killing beneficial insects too. There's a saying that Mother Nature always bats last. I have a couple advantages of using free ecosystem services. This one from Michigan State University, where they were looking at nematodes. And nematodes get kind of a bad rap, but of the hundreds, maybe thousands of different species of nematodes out there, there are only a few that are really pathogenic. So these guys were looking at the ratio of the good guys to the bad guys. So the higher numbers are good, and that's on the vertical scale. The bars represent different cropping systems. Number one is a conventional system, corn, soybeans, wheat. Number two is the same as number one, except that the herbicides are banded. 3 is the same as 2, except they use compost instead of synthetic fertilizer. And number 4 is a completely organic system. And you can see that the ratio of good guys to bad guys is about 3 times as much in the organic system. Another example, this one from Indonesia, where they raise a lot of rice, and there were 27, I think, different chemicals that were approved for application to rice. And at one point, at the insistence of a Hindu priest, the Indonesian government said, okay, this is enough of this. And they banned 26 of those 27 chemicals and restricted when the 27th could be used. So they went from 4.5 applications per year to half an application of a year. The cost to the farmer declined by 2/3. Cost to the government declined by about 90%. And conventional wisdom would say this is going to be a disaster. But yields actually went up because they were allowing Mother Nature to do its thing and use those free ecosystem services. Over the 20 years that I've been organic, I've had very few pesticide issues that were serious. One was this one. This is a soybean aphid. This is not a life-size picture in case anybody's getting freaked out. These are tiny little things, but they can cause an awful lot of damage. But Iowa State has developed genetic resistance and in the soybeans. And so I plant all aphid-resistant soybeans now. That has taken care of that problem. I probably would have European corn borers, but all of my neighbors use BT corn. So I can't really claim ecosystem service for that. It's probably because of my neighbor's BT corn. As far as diseases go, sudden death syndrome in soybeans is a serious disease. And in this research, they're looking at the incidence severity on the vertical scale. The blue bar is a 2-year rotation and the red bar is a 4-year rotation. Again, not even organic, but just a longer rotation. And the incidence and severity is drastically reduced in the organic system. And soybean sudden death syndrome is, I'm not sure it's ever seen in organic systems. All right, climate change, which is what I really wanted to talk about. This is an interesting graph from the 4th National Climate Assessment. It's got change in temperature from the pre-industrial time on the vertical scale, and you guys are all familiar with that black line. It looks like an exponential increase in temperature over the last 150 years. And the interesting thing that these guys did, because there is some controversy, people will say that these are natural cycles, they're not, this isn't human caused. And they looked at natural forcings such as volcanoes, sunspots, changes in solar insolation, and they know what they call it fingerprinting. They know what the temperature and climate results of all of those things are, and they know exactly when they've happened in the last 150 years, so that they can separate that out from the overall trend. And that's a green line. And that leaves you with the red line that is the human drivers, the anthropogenic factor. So, I think this is pretty conclusive evidence that the humans have a part in this. These are physical drivers. You guys all know this. The main things are carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide that farming can do something about. Agriculture is responsible for about 10% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. 1% of all fossil fuel use goes to making anhydrous ammonia. And synthetic nitrogen fertilizer is about 20% of total ag greenhouse gas emissions. So we are responsible for some of this. What I've tried to do here, I'm not sure how well I did it, but if you look at the total greenhouse gas emissions of 55.3 gigatons CO2 emissions equivalent per year, I've tried to divide that up into the various things that contribute to it. And the size of the bubble here is hopefully going to represent the size of that contributor. And there's some controversy over this. Different people have different numbers, so it's a little bit tentative. But most everybody's big dog is the burning of fossil fuels, and these are direct forcings only. They don't include the feedback loops. But this is some work from David Pimentel at Cornell University. The two bars on the left are organic rotations. The one on the right is conventional. And this is just a measure of the fossil fuel energy use in those systems. And you can see that the organic systems use about 2/3 of the fossil fuel energy of the conventional system. And that's almost entirely due to the nitrogen fertilizer, which is horrendously energy intensive. And people complain about how much tillage we do to control weeds, and that's a good point, well taken. And I'm trying to reduce that, but pesticides are energy intensive too. And you probably weren't expecting to see a jug of Roundup on my slides. But I can rotary hoe twice and cultivate twice and use 578 megajoules per hectare. Or I could spray Roundup once for 763 megajoules per hectare. And that's just the material. It's not even the application of it. And these numbers are several years old. So people use a lot more Roundup now than they did. So it's probably worse than that. This goes back to that research that I talked about a minute ago with Natalie Hunt and Matt Liebman. This was sort of a summary paragraph. They said, results suggest that diversification via shifting from conventional corn soybean rotations to longer rotations with small grain and forage crops substantially reduced fossil energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, and air quality damages without compromising economic or agronomic performance. The next several slides are from that really remarkable research. And I realize that you probably won't be able to see this very well, but again, there are 3 different rotations and each one is divided into a conventional and a low herbicide regime. And this divides that fossil energy use into the various fractions like diesel fuel, nitrogen fertilizer production. And this is a 9-year life cycle analysis. So it includes not just the burning of the diesel fuel, but the energy used to produce that diesel fuel in the first place, or the amount of energy that was used to get the seeds to your farm. And the thing I would like you to notice is just the shape of this curve, how the fossil energy consumption goes down as you extend that rotation. This is greenhouse gas emissions, and the bars are divided into nitrous oxide, methane, and carbon dioxide. And the shape of the curve is about the same. Here's some that I'm sure you can't see. The upper left is the emissions of anhydrous ammonia. The upper right is NOx's, lower left SOx's, and lower right is volatile organic compounds. But the point here is that the shape of the curves are the same, and extending that rotation limits some of those bad things. They also looked at the economic damages, and the health effects. On the left scale where it says PM 2.5, this is particulate matter, and these are the really, really tiny things that get in your lungs and cause the health damages, and they put costs on that, you know, even including the cost of human lives. And so that's where these numbers come from. And again, the shape of the curve is the same. So what do I do about fossil fuel use? Well, being organic, I use about 2/3 of what my conventional neighbors do. I also have an 18 kilowatt solar array where I produce all of the electricity that my home and my farm use every year. So the next thing on a lot of people's list is land use. And when you think land use, you probably think of deforestation, which it is 20% of global carbon dioxide emissions, both from the direct burning of the trees and the slash and burn agriculture, but also because those trees are no longer there consuming carbon dioxide. But the secret is to keep the ground covered. And we may think that this is just a problem in the Amazon basin in Brazil, but we're in the middle of probably the most altered ecosystem on Earth, the tall grass prairie. And the secret is to keep the ground covered. So in my case, if you look at the green underneath this triticale, that is red clover. So the triticale is no-tilled right behind the combine in October. I overseed it with red clover in the spring. When the triticale is combined in July, then the clover really takes off. By September, it will look like this. I clip it because there are a few weeds there. It will come back and get ahead of the weeds, and it will be a foot or two tall again by freeze up, and it will stay green probably till Christmas time. We'll have living roots in the soil all winter long and ground cover until the following April or May when it is just to plant corn. So there's no tillage and there's ground cover and there's living roots in the soil for about 15 months in that case. Erosion is on a lot of people's list as the #2 issue. The UCS, Union of Concerned Scientists, recently published last year, they said, and this is slightly paraphrased, that unhealthy farming practices and climate change may cause soil erosion rivaling that of the Dust Bowl. And it may be the second largest contributor of all of the greenhouse gas emissions. 75% of it is fossil fuels and food waste. 25% of it is soil organic matter and erosion. And I ran into a couple of just unbelievable statistics. First, that the world has lost 26 tons of soil per human in the last 6 years. And I thought that just can't be. So I used a T-level soil loss of 5 tons per acre times the acres of arable land and divided by the number of people in the world. And yeah, it can be. And the other one is that the Mississippi River still delivers 1 dump truck load of soil to the Gulf of Mexico every second. And I don't want to downplay what's been accomplished, because we have made tremendous accomplishments here with the Soil Conservation Service and now Natural Resources Conservation Service and no-till and terraces. We've made a lot of progress, but that is still true. And again, I looked at the flow rate of the Mississippi River and the silt loading in it, and yeah, it can be true. It's maybe a small dump truck, but yeah, it's a dump truck per second. And we can expect a 30% decline of food in the next 50 years just because of soil erosion. And then you have salinization and desertification to consider also. And contour rows, no-till, prairie strips, grass waterways and headlands, cover crops, no primary tillage, all of those things can help. I have a no-till drill. This is drilling triticale right behind the combine. You can see beans that aren't even combined yet in the background. This looks pretty black, but if you came back a week later, you couldn't even tell that you'd been there. Again, the Iowa State Strips project, if you compare the left side to the right side of this picture, if you have 10% of your land in prairie strips, you can expect a 4-fold increase in plant species, twice the bird species, 3 times the abundance, 32% less runoff, 95% soil export, 82% less nitrogen export, and 89% less phosphorus export, just because putting these narrow strips. They are unbelievably effective, and they're beautiful. Food waste, it's a big deal. I'm not going to talk about it. I do have some information if somebody's interested later. So soil organic matter. According to the Rodale Institute, our annual CO2 emissions of 37.5 gigatons per year could all be mitigated by organic farming, most of it by regenerative grazing. And I'm not going to talk about that part at all either, mainly because I don't know anything about it. But organic agriculture has a part to play. And what I've done here is for each of these references, I've tried to take just a summary statement out of the abstract or the conclusion that sort of summarizes that paper. Organic increased sequestered carbon by 26%, soil organic carbon increased 18%, and stocks by 3.5 megagrams of carbon per hectare. Organic is 18% less warming potential, can lower greenhouse gases by 20%. Cover crops are more effective than no-till, which may surprise some people. And if they were comparing compost with conventional fertilizer, the compost yielded 2 tons of carbon per hectare per year stored, where the actual conventional agriculture lost carbon. But all is not rainbows and unicorns here. This is from the Wisconsin Integrated Cropping Systems Trial. It went on for 20 years. They had 6 different rotations. The 3 on the left were kind of row crop agriculture. The 3 on the right included animals, and we go from continuous corn, corn, soybeans, organic. And of those 6 rotations over that 20-year period, the pasture, permanent pasture, was the only one that sequestered any carbon at all. All the others were losing ground. So I think the point here is that there are so many variables that we're not really sure why it works sometimes and not others. But last year, Northeastern University just released a multi-year study comparing side-by-side organic and conventional farms from 48 states, and found 13% higher soil organic matter and 44% higher long-term carbon storage in organic systems. And likewise, University of Maryland just published a meta-analysis of 4,000 scientific articles and found 18% improvement in soil organic carbon, 30% improvement in microbial biomass. And their conclusion was that organic soil amendments like compost are the most influential. Okay, so how do we make soil organic matter? And we've lost a lot. We've lost 30 to 70% of it since European settlement. And there's more carbon in the soil organic matter than there is either in the atmosphere or in terrestrial vegetation. And I had a misunderstanding about this. I thought that it was the plant residues, especially the high carbon things like cellulose and lignin, that contributed to organic matter. But it turns out that it's more of it is that the plant provides sugars to feed the soil microbes. And when these microbes die, it's their bodies that become that long-term stored carbon. So it's not the recalcitrant plant matter, it's the microbes. And organic has 32 to 84% more microbial biomass, And it's less tillage and winter cover crops that increase the abundance. Best management practices: year-round living roots, finished compost, diversity of crops, cover crops and sod, and reduced tillage. And I try to do all of those. And it's at various depths too. As you go down on this figure, each set of 3 bars represents a lower point in the soil profile. Each set of bars is 15 centimeters. So these folks went down 2 meters and looked at carbon. On the left, it's the concentration, and on the right, it's the carbon stocks. And at every depth, the organic system stored more carbon than did the conventional system. Organic beats no-till, like I said a minute ago. Organic can provide greater long-term benefits than conventional no-till despite the use of some tillage. No-till alone, in the absence of cover crops and diverse crop rotation, does not sequester carbon. Diversifying with cover crops is more effective than no-till in sequestering carbon. And again, cover crops counteract some negative impacts of tillage. So, does biodiversity matter? Well, if you have more diversity of crops above ground, you get a larger diversity of microbes below ground. And ecological intensification depends on enhancing below ground biodiversity. And organic farms have 30% higher species richness, and the effect is greater with ag intensification. And biodiversity is the primary driver. Nitrous oxide. This is a big deal because N2O molecule for molecule is about 310 times more potent than carbon dioxide, and almost all of it comes from nitrogen fertilizer, mostly from the soil. The horizontal scale is the fertilizer rate, and N2O emissions is on the vertical axis. The number one practice we found that leads to not only the biggest, but also the most rapid increase in carbon sequestration is to stop using synthetic fertilizer and start using organic amendments. 8% of anthropogenic green global warming potential is nitrous oxide, most of that from agriculture. Organic lowers new reactive N by 50%, and a lot less N2O comes from manure than does if you're fertilizing with synthetic fertilizer. Organic farming can potentially sequester more carbon to the soils and thus convert the soils to a carbon sink rather than a source that it has been. Half of the fossil fuel-based fertilizer never gets into the crops, ends up in the environment. For combined N2O and CO2, compost reduced carbon dioxide equivalent by 49% versus urea fertilizer. And legume cover crops are twice as efficient as storing soil organic carbon as synthetic and fertilizer. This is another meta-analysis. I tried to look at these more than individual papers so that I wouldn't be totally misled. This is 12 countries, 38 sites, 422 observations, and the organic fields released 1/2 as much N2O as conventional fields. And if you look at the second column to the right, the default here from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the emission factor of 1, and that's because 1% of all nitrogen fertilizer is emitted as nitrous oxide. So that's where they came up with that number. So any number that's less than that, like the 0.82 for organic sources, means you're doing better than synthetic fertilizer. But the one that kind of surprised me here was the animal slurries, the 1.21. In other words, if you're using liquid pig manure, a lot of that ends up as nitrous oxide. So my fertility management, I use the cover crops. I get 80 to 100 pounds of nitrogen from that red clover. I used a wee little bit of chicken manure occasionally. I get some beef manure that I that I compost. Again, the red clover. This is the compost. I get it from a neighbor. I have a compost turner. I actually have a really good deal. I give all of my straw from my small grains to this neighbor, and then he gives me back the manure at the end of the day. So again, a little bit more about Prairie Strips. You get so many additional benefits from these. You get increased beneficial insect diversity. Organic supports 50% more pollinators. There are just innumerable benefits to these strips, including habitat for beneficial insects. Just a quick note, some of the criticisms leveled against organic agriculture. This one goes that because organic yields less, we're going to need more land to feed the world. And those additional acres will probably be more marginal acres, and we end up doing more environmental damage than we otherwise would. So is this true? Well, in the first place, it assumes steady conventional yields in the face of climate change, which is kind of a dubious assumption. In the second place, the LTAR studies that Kathleen Dellett has done in Iowa, the Rodale Systems trial, both of them are like 20 or 30 years old, and they've shown yields that are comparable. Ecosystem services instead of synthetic inputs is key to achieving food security. Agriculture absolutely can feed the world, and it can do it while stabilizing the climate, regenerating ecosystems, restoring biodiversity, and enhancing rural communities. That's according to Rodale Institute. Another one is that agriculture, organic agriculture, relies too much on tillage. Absolutely true. And I'm trying to do something about that. Rotation had a much bigger effect on the mitigation potential of greenhouse gas emissions than did tillage. But a lot of people, probably many on this call, have been experimenting with the roller crimper system, where we try and do less and less tillage, and I think we're getting better at it. This kindly looking gentleman said, is Ratan Lal of Ohio State University, said, when people are poverty stricken and starving, they pass on their suffering to the land. And that's very thought provoking, but I think it's equally true and perhaps more poignant if you turn it around. If the land is stricken, if it's eroded or overtilled or overgrazed or nearly devoid of life, then it passes its suffering on to the people who depend on it for their sustenance. On any given day, there are 71 million people displaced from their homes. And granted, many of those are fleeing persecution and violence, but many are also climate refugees. They're fleeing degraded soils that are no longer able to support them, and their numbers will increase. And I think organic agriculture may have a part to play in helping to relieve some of that suffering, both for the land and for its people. So I end up where I started. At the end of the day, this is what it's all about. I hope to leave my farm a better place after my tenure without destroying the earth in the process. Like the Native American proverb says, we don't inherit the land from our fathers, we borrow it from our children. And that's all I have. And I would just love to answer questions and to just have a discussion.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul. This was incredible. Thank you so much for doing all of this research and sharing with all of us today. There are quite a few questions and great conversation that has been happening in the chat box. So I will go ahead and kind of look through all of the questions and give you the ones that don't repeat themselves. So as you can imagine, the questions were kind of progressing along with your slides. So we're kind of going back to the beginning of your slides. So Kim Alexander said, but AOC said we only have 12 years before the end of the world due to man-made climate change. What are your thoughts on that?
I hope it's not that bad. You can read lots of estimates. Yeah.
Okay. And then he also had a follow-up question, and he said, is it not true that all the facets of the broken food system are brought to us by the big ag?
Well, I don't know if I would say all. Certainly some of them are. There are pesticides in the food. Especially insidious, I think, are the OP insecticides and the endocrine disruptors that are active at just minute amounts. And a lot of our pesticides are mimic hormones in the body and are, I think, very dangerous.
He also said, how hard is it to find bean walkers and how much do you pay them?
Well, you just need grandkids. I have hired our Hispanic brethren sometimes if I have more weeds than my grandkids want to pull. And them I pay, they're up to around $25 an hour. Now, my grandkids, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I pay them whatever grade they are in school. I pay them that hourly rate. So, and
that's pretty
they
good.
don't work real hard at it.
Yeah, that works well. What is your source of N for your corn crop?
Like I said, I get 80 to 100 pounds of nitrogen from that red clover. And then I get some from the beef cow-calf compost. So yeah, I try and get, I'm shooting for maybe 150 pounds of nitrogen available.
Okay, great. What are the grasses peeking over the bean rows?
Oh, the weeds? Probably giant foxtail.
Okay.
Or maybe he's thinking of the strips, the colored strips in the background.
Yeah, that might.
Those are supposed to be there. Those are the narrow prairie strips, and like I said, they're beautiful. I try and have something that's flowering all the time, and habitat for beneficial insects. Yeah, so that may be what he's asking about.
Okay, yeah, that could be. What battles are we winning with 100% increase of losses to insects?
Oh, say that one again.
Kim, do you want to jump in on that? I'm not sure if I'm relaying that question.
We're talking about the loss of diversity of
loss of insects. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a serious issue. It doesn't get as much publicity as it probably should, but we're losing insect species at a very rapid rate, and I think in a lot of cases, everybody just wants to get rid of bugs, but everything has a function out here, and we don't realize the good that some of these things are doing for us.
Yeah.
That's a serious issue.
Yeah, and you guys feel free to unmute yourself if I am not relaying the questions correctly to Paul. Feel free to, unmute yourself and ask them. I'll keep going down the line as we have still quite a few. What are your average yields and prices on your crops?
My yields are a little less than my neighbors. For corn, I've gotten 200 bushel an acre quite a few times. I'm going to be a little less because I plant so late, like mid to end of May compared to my neighbors. Soybeans, I'll get mid 50s. Again, I'm a little less than my neighbors because I plant food grade varieties that are just going to yield a little bit less in general. Small grains, I should be comparable to everybody else, but none of my neighbors raise small grains anymore, so it's hard to find a comparison. But prices, I sell quite a few of my beans for seed that I get more for. The food grade soybeans right now are about $24 a bushel, and corn about $8 a bushel. But it goes up and down like conventional.
Yeah. The next question is, what do your neighbors think about your farming practice?
That's a great question. When I first started doing this 20 years ago, and I think for other farmers that are considering transition now, that's a big deal because, I live right along two major highways, and farmers just look at how everybody else is farming when they're going down the road. And I know I get talked about in the coffee shop quite regularly, and that used to really bother me, but really doesn't anymore. Most of my neighbors are really good. They understand what I'm doing, and I think almost envy it. They're also very good about considering the wind before they spray. So they know what I'm about, and I guess I'm lucky that I have good neighbors.
That's awesome. That's so good to hear, Paul. The other question is, do you have battery storage for that photovoltaic electricity, or do you just sell it back to the REC?
Actually, neither one. I don't have batteries. This is Mid-American, and they give me what's called net energy billing. So like now, when I'm producing more electricity than I'm using, it goes out onto the grid, but they don't buy it from me. It's just a credit. So then next fall, when I'm drying corn and I need more electricity, I get that back off the grid, and no money changes hands unless I need more than what I have credit on the grid. So I don't have batteries, and if the grid goes down, my collector goes down. That's an automatic. They want to make sure that I'm not feeding electricity back into their lines. It's a safety thing. So yeah, it's not a substitute for the grid.
Okay. Michael O said, what do you do with the triticale grain? Sell or for feed?
No, I sell it for seed. With Albert Lee Seed House markets it for me. So yeah, that's my first choice for small grain, because I know they're going to pick it up right away because they want to sell it for seed yet that fall, and so I know I'm going to get my bin back to store corn in the fall. And again, it's really nice to have a fall seeded crop in the rotation because it really messes up the cycle of those summer annual weeds.
Okay. When you were talking about the various solutions, it deals with that question. So Kim is saying, how many of those solutions, terraces, etc., are engineering fixes to biological problems?
Ooh.
The deep one.
Yeah. Well, hopefully with my reduced tillage and, ridge till and no till, I wouldn't be getting a lot of runoff and erosion. And I don't have really steep slopes. I'm, 2 to 5%. So maybe there wouldn't be a lot in the first place, but there's always some. And these strips are very effective. They're as good as terraces. And yeah, I guess it would be nice to be able to do everything biologically. I have to be able to produce food, and I have to feed the kids too.
Yeah, sure. All right. Gary has a question for you. He says, curious about Paul's thoughts on what one or two things would be most helpful in expanding the number of farms like this. It's an amazing operation. We need more.
Well, it depends a lot on the demand, and there is quite a bit of demand for organic crops and produce and animals, meat, agriculture, and dairy, everything right now. And there are quite a few people that are transitioning to organic, but it's kind of driven by demand. We need a place to sell what we produce, but for me, there are other things that are at least as important as just the economic incentives and environment, and there's some social things too. I just have 300 acres and I can make a living on that. And what's better for our small communities and schools and churches if there's 10 of me on 300 acres or one guy on 3,000 acres? There's that aspect to it too. There are spiritual aspects. There are lots of reasons to be an organic farmer.
I love that. I love that very much, and I agree with all those reasons. Mary is asking, can we get these slides? I'd love to follow up and read some of the studies being cited, and thank you for citing research.
Yeah, Olga, you can provide that, I think. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think you've updated them since last time I had them. So if you want to send me the updated version, I will. Yes, I'll go ahead and share it with folks. But yeah, we
Okay.
can certainly share the slides with you guys. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of information out there. I was overwhelmed, actually. I felt like I was back in college doing a term paper or something.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for pulling all of that research. It's captivating to say the least. Kim is asking he's saying the biggest thing to positively change American agriculture is cancel all government programs that support conventional agriculture, so chemical farmers no longer have that crutch. What?
I think I'm going to stay away from that one.
Okay, all right. Muriel says the world needs to feed itself locally. What are your thoughts on that, Paul?
I think that would be wonderful. Yeah, but the average food on our plate like travels 1,300 miles or something like that. That's a big part of the problem, and food waste is another huge part of the problem. Something like a third of all the food produced goes to waste, and it ends up in a landfill producing methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas, and you have thousands of people starving to death.
Yeah, that's devastating.
So,
yeah. Ratan Lal's quote, what does that say about Iowa farmers?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's another one from Kim. He's got all the good ones today.
Yeah, it is a very thought-provoking quote, and he's just a kindly looking gentleman. It does make you think. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We can certainly do better.
Yeah, certainly. Linda is saying, Paul, you have a beautiful family. And then Kim is saying, are any of your kids planning on taking over the farm after you retire?
I have a son-in-law that they just live like 8 miles away that is farming with his dad, and I think he would like to take over someday. And actually, all my kids are interested in agriculture. They all have other careers, but they help out on the farm sometimes, walking beans or whatever. So yeah, hopefully it will stay in the family. I'm hoping to farm it for a few years yet. Perfect.
Jeff is asking, how do you measure the amount of N from red clover?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's nothing very scientific about that. That goes back a long time ago at Practical Farmers of Iowa, where we were doing the late spring soil nitrate test. And it was just comparing strips that had red clover following soybeans with nothing, and looking at the differences in the soil nitrogen nitrate from that test. So it's a guess. It's kind of an estimate, and I think it's in line with what you see in the literature. But I get just a tremendous amount of biomass from that clover. It's probably 2 feet tall and flowering out when I clip it, and then it's another foot or foot and a half tall again. So I get a lot of biomass, and you get some weed control and crop ground protection, and there's a lot of benefits to that other than just the nitrogen.
Kim's asking, how does your net income per acre compare to conventional net per acre?
It's better, and I think it would probably be better even if I weren't getting organic premiums, because my costs are probably $50 an acre lower, because I'm not buying pesticides, I'm not buying synthetic fertilizer. So my costs would be lower, and then, on the other side of that, I'm getting a little bit less yield. So it would probably be a wash. But then if you throw in the organic premiums, yeah, it works economically.
Okay. D. Calderon says, what challenges you will see for your kids and grandkids interested in following your steps?
Yeah, I don't know. Weeds are always an issue. Like I say, that insects and diseases have really not been a problem at all, but weeds are. You have to stay on top of it. But the equipment is getting better. When I started, it was way more difficult than it is now, and there was way less information and resources available. But I have a camera guidance system now for the cultivator that is just unbelievably accurate. We have RTK guidance that the tractor drives itself down the rows, and they keep coming up with new equipment, and we keep coming up with better biological systems. The roller crimper thing with the rye, we get better cover crops, and there's a lot of research going on, and I think we will continue to get better at it. The federal government is supporting more organic research, and I think the future is bright. I think the demand will continue to grow as people realize that we are what we eat, and we're eating not so well. And I think people are finally starting to realize that, and I think demand will grow.
Yeah, absolutely. The most recent organic survey just showed the immense growth from 2016 to 2019 by 30%. So, it's safe to say that this is not a trend, but, something that's going to continue for years to come. Kim says, Paul, but back in the 1970s, Secretary of Agriculture Earl Butz said American farmers needed to get big or get out. Why didn't you believe him?
Well, I didn't. I started farming in 76. I worked as an engineer for a few years before that, and I didn't have the resources to get big. So, but I'd always been interested in environmental reasons. I took part in the very first Earth Day in the 70s when I was in college. And so I'd always had that environmental bent, and I always tried to farm a little more environmentally than my neighbors. But I used, Treflan and atrazine and anhydrous ammonia for when I first started farming too, when I took over from my dad. So it's been a sort of an evolution. And I forgot what that question actually was.
Well, he was just saying how the Secretary of Agriculture said to get big or get out.
Earl Butz, fence row to fence row. Yeah, I never really bought into that.
Gotcha. Well, I believe this is all the questions that I see. Did I miss anyone? Okay, Suzanne is saying, is the farm your sole source of income for your family, or does someone work off farm for healthcare, etc.?
It's the sole source now. For a few years, I did some part-time teaching, but I was like 4/10 time at a tiny little private school 30 miles away. So I didn't make any money at that at all. That was more for rewarding than it was for making money. So yeah, basically my wife is retired. She worked as a home health aide for a while, part-time. So yeah, the farm has really been by far the biggest source of income over the years.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And Kim is saying, great job, Paul, and great job, Olga. Thank you both. So I guess, if there are any final questions, you guys, let us know. Otherwise, we will probably be concluding our presentation today. Thank you, everyone, again for joining. what I will do is I will actually post this video on our YouTube channel. So feel free to come back to it later. I know there was a lot of information, so I will also try to divide it into chapters so you can easily view it. But in addition, as part of our grant process, we actually have to report back to our grantors, and this is why we send out surveys. So I will be sending you guys a survey asking about your feedback on this program and just additional comments. So please fill that out. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes or so. And again, thank you everybody for coming. Paul, thank you for this incredible presentation. And I will be in touch with everyone and sending out the slides.
I want to thank all of you for your attention and for your questions. And I meant what I said. If you want to call and chit chat, that would be great. Anyone that wants to visit my farm, you're welcome here anytime. Thank you all very much.
Yes. Thank you, Paul.